Marcus Williams steps into the first-class cabin of Global Airways Flight 447 with the quiet confidence of a man who has earned his place in the world. His designer polo shirt bears no logos, his leather briefcase shows the gentle wear of constant travel, and his demeanor suggests someone comfortable in boardrooms and corner offices. Yet as he moves down the narrow aisle, searching for seat 2 Ampere, the temperature in the cabin seems to drop several degrees. Flight attendant Sarah Mitchell looks up from her pre-flight checklist, her smile freezing mid-formation as she takes in Marcus's appearance. Her eyes narrow almost imperceptibly, the kind of micro-expression that speaks volumes to those trained to read such signal. She exchanges a meaningful glance with her colleague, Robert Chen, the lead flight attendant whose 20-year career has taught him to read passengers like open books. "Excuse me." Sarah's voice carries the artificial sweetness of someone forcing politeness. "You don't belong here." The words hang in the air like a challenge, each syllable dripping with presumption and barely concealed disdain. Marcus pauses, his hand resting on the leather seat back, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes in the cabin turning toward him. The familiar knot forms in his stomach, the same sensation he's carried since childhood, when teachers questioned his presence in advanced classes, when security guards followed him through department stores, when colleagues assumed he was the diversity hire rather than the decision-maker. But today feels different. Today, the 8-hour flight to London stretches ahead like a gauntlet he's been unconsciously preparing for his entire life. Marcus settles into his window seat with deliberate calm, clicking his seatbelt with the precision of someone who has learned that every movement is watched, every reaction judged. He opens his laptop, the screen illuminating his face as he scrolls through emails marked Urgent and CEO Eyes Only. The irony isn't lost on him, surrounded by people who assume he doesn't belong, while literally owning the airline that employs them. But they don't know that yet, and Marcus has learned that power revealed too early loses its impact. "You won't believe what happens when I decide I've had enough," he murmurs to himself, a promise that will soon reshape everything aboard this aircraft. The cabin doors seal shut with a pneumatic hiss, and Marcus Williams, CEO of Global Airways, Harvard MBA, and the man who signs the paychecks of everyone who just dismissed him settles in for a flight that will change everything. Marcus maintains his composure as Sarah and Robert begin their elaborate theater of professional discourtesy. Their movements are choreographed with the precision of people who have performed this particular dance, before the subtle shoulder turns when he speaks, the delayed responses to his requests, the way they lavish attention on the elderly white couple in 1 Ampere while treating him like an unwelcome intruder. "Good morning," Marcus offers politely as Sarah passes his row, adjusting overhead compartments with unnecessary vigor. She continues past without acknowledgement, her attention suddenly consumed by a passenger 3 rows ahead who requires extensive assistance with a perfectly manageable carry-on bag. Robert approaches with a tablet in hand, his uniform pressed to crisp perfection, badge gleaming under the cabin lights. "Sir, I need to verify your boarding pass." His tone suggests this is routine, but Marcus notices how the same verification wasn't required for any other first-class passenger. Marcus hands over his boarding pass without comment, watching as Robert's eyes scan the document with theatrical thoroughness. The pass clearly shows seat 2 Ampere, first class, with the distinctive gold stamp indicating a full fare ticket. Yet Robert frowns as if decoding hieroglyphics. "This seems..." Robert pauses dramatically, holding the pass at various angles. "Are you certain this is your assigned seat?" "Quite certain," Marcus replies, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone accustomed to having his authority questioned. He reaches for his phone, fingers dancing across the screen as he pulls up his confirmation email, the frequent flyer status clearly visible, the purchase history showing dozens of first-class flights on this exact route. Sarah reappears, drawn by some invisible signal that trouble might be brewing. She examines the phone screen with the skepticism of a customs agent inspecting suspicious cargo. "These digital confirmations can be unreliable," she says, the implication clear. The passenger in 1C, a distinguished man in his 60s wearing a Princeton-class ring, clears his throat uncomfortably. He's witnessed this exchange with growing unease, recognizing the coded language of discrimination. His wife clutches her pearls literally, as if witnessing something unseemly. Marcus notices their discomfort but doesn't acknowledge it. Instead, he returns to his laptop, fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. To the casual observer, he appears to be checking emails. In reality, he's logging into the Global Airways executive portal, documenting everything: timestamps, personnel badge numbers, witness locations. The plane begins its taxi toward the runway, engines humming with increasing intensity. Through his window, Marcus watches ground crews guide the aircraft with orange-lit batons, their movements precise and purposeful. Unlike the cabin crew's performance, these workers understand that every action has consequences, that precision matters when lives are at stake. Sarah returns with a glass of water lukewarm, in a plastic cup rather than the crystal glasses other passengers receive. She places it on his tray table with a gesture that manages to be both technically correct and thoroughly dismissive. "Thank you," Marcus says, his politeness unwavering. He takes a sip and sets the cup aside, his attention returning to the screen, where he's begun composing a message to his chief of staff, Jessica Rodriguez. The subject line reads, "Operational assessment required, Flight 447." As the aircraft lifts off, climbing through layers of clouds toward cruising altitude, Marcus Williams begins his own ascent from passenger to prosecutor, gathering evidence for a case that's been building for far too long. The seatbelt sign chimes off, and with it, any pretense of professional courtesy evaporates like morning mist. Sarah and Robert have found their rhythm now, emboldened by the confined space and the assumption that their behavior will have no consequences beyond this flight. "Sir, I need to ask you some questions." Robert's voice carries new authority as he approaches Marcus's seat with a clipboard and the demeanor of someone conducting an interrogation rather than ensuring passenger comfort. Marcus looks up from his laptop, where he's been reviewing quarterly reports that show Global Airways' record-breaking profits. Profits generated partly by passengers exactly like him, of course. "How can I help you?" "We need to verify that you have the financial means to afford this ticket." Robert's words land like a slap, each syllable calculated to humiliate. There's been some confusion about payment methods recently. The request is absurd on multiple levels. Passengers aren't required to prove their economic status post-purchase, and the ticket was clearly processed successfully. But Marcus recognizes this for what it is: a fishing expedition designed to justify predetermined assumptions. "My ticket was purchased with a corporate credit card," Marcus responds evenly. "The transaction was completed weeks ago." Sarah appears as if summoned, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Corporate cards can be problematic. We've had issues with stolen credentials, unauthorized usage." She pauses, letting the implications settle. "Perhaps you could show us some additional identification, something that proves you have legitimate business reasons for this travel?" The elderly couple in 1 ampere exchange uncomfortable glances. The man later Marcus will learn his name is David Hoffman. A retired federal judge begins quietly recording on his phone, his legal instincts recognizing discrimination when he sees it. Marcus reaches for his wallet, extracting his driver's license, corporate ID, and 3 different credit cards. He spreads them on his tray table like playing cards, each document bearing his name in clear, official lettering. Will these suffice? Robert examines each document with exaggerated scrutiny, holding them up to the light as if checking for watermarks. "Marcus Williams," he reads aloud, his tone suggesting the name itself is suspicious. "And you work for Global Airways," Marcus replies simply. It's not a lie, technically. He works for the company in the most literal sense possible. In what capacity? Sarah's question drips with skepticism, as if she's certain she's caught him in a fabrication. Executive management. Again, technically accurate, though the full scope of his authority remains unspoken. The interrogation continues for another 20 minutes, each question more invasive than the last. They want to know his salary, his travel frequency, his business contacts in London. They demand to see his boarding pass again, his frequent flyer credentials, his hotel confirmation. Other passengers begin to take notice. A businesswoman in 3D stops typing on her laptop to stare. A young couple in row 4 whispers in what they think are inaudible tones about the situation up front. Through it all, Marcus maintains his composure with the discipline of someone who has endured far worse. He answers each question with factual precision, provides every document requested, meets each challenge with unflappable professionalism. But behind his calm exterior, something is building. Each condescending question, each suspicious glance, each moment of manufactured doubt adds another layer to a case he's constructing in real time. His fingers move across his phone's keyboard, sending encrypted messages to Jessica Rodriguez, with updates that will soon trigger response protocols these flight attendants never imagined possible. "We appreciate your patience, Mr. Williams," Robert says finally, returning his documents with the reluctance of someone forced to relinquish evidence. "We're just doing our jobs." Marcus pockets his identification and returns his attention to his laptop. "Of course," he says quietly. "We all are." The turbulence hits without warning, not meteorological, but entirely man-made. Sarah approaches Marcus's seat carrying a meal tray that immediately sets off every alarm bell in his mind. While other first-class passengers receive their meals on bone china with proper silverware, Marcus stares at a plastic tray containing what appears to be a sandwich with distinctly green edges and a fruit cup that has clearly seen better days. The bread shows unmistakable signs of mold, fuzzy patches of blue-green growth that would make any health inspector reach for their citation book. The lettuce has turned brown and slimy, and the apple slices in the fruit cup have developed a dark, unappetizing film. "Here's your meal, sir," Sarah announces with mock cheerfulness, setting the tray down as if presenting a 5-star offering. Marcus stares at the plate, his legal mind immediately calculating the implications. Serving contaminated food isn't just discrimination, it's a health violation that could shut down operations, a liability issue that could cost millions, a public relations nightmare that could destroy careers. "This food appears to be spoiled," Marcus says calmly, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone presenting evidence in a courtroom. Sarah examines the tray with theatrical confusion, as if noticing the mold for the first time. "It looks fine to me," she declares with a shrug that suggests Marcus's concerns are irrelevant. "This is the meal service for your ticket type." The words hit like a physical blow. Not the food, the words. The implication that his ticket type entitles him to contaminated meals, while other passengers enjoy fresh cuisine, creates a connection so blatant, so legally actionable, that Marcus actually has to suppress a laugh. Robert arrives as if on cue, surveying the situation with the detached authority of a manager handling a customer complaint. "Is there a problem here? The food appears to be moldy," Marcus repeats, gesturing to the obvious contamination. Robert picks up the sandwich, examines it with exaggerated attention, then sets it back down. "This is the standard meal service. If you're not satisfied with what we provide, perhaps you should have made special arrangements." "Special arrangements for non-contaminated food?" "Special arrangements for your particular dietary requirements." Robert's pause carries volumes of meaning. The exchange draws attention from nearby passengers. David Hoffman in 1 Ampere has his phone positioned to capture everything, his decades of judicial experience recognizing a civil rights violation in progress. A young tech executive in 3C begins typing furiously on her phone later. Marcus will learn she's live tweeting the incident. "I understand you're just following protocols," Marcus says, pulling out his phone with deliberate calm. His fingers move across the screen, not frantically, but with the precision of someone launching a carefully planned operation. The message he sends is brief but loaded with significance. "Jessica, activate Condition Alpha. Flight 447, full documentation required." Condition Alpha, a protocol established for exactly this type of situation, when the CEO encounters discrimination that requires immediate corporate response. Within minutes, wheels will begin turning in Global Airways headquarters that these flight attendants cannot imagine. Sarah watches him type with growing unease, as if sensing that his calm demeanor masks something dangerous. "Sir, if you continue to complain about our service, We'll have to note your behavior in our incident report. Of course, Marcus replies, setting his phone aside. Documentation is very important. He looks at the moldy sandwich again, then at Sarah, then at Robert. You're absolutely right. This is exactly the kind of service that defines an airline, the kind that shows what leadership really values. The irony of his words sails completely over their heads, but David Hoffman catches the subtext immediately. He leans forward slightly, his judicial instincts telling him he's about to witness something extraordinary. Through the aircraft windows, clouds drift past in pristine white formations, but inside the cabin, a storm is building that will soon make the weather outside seem trivial by comparison. You know what, Mr. Williams? Sarah's voice takes on a tone that every passenger in first class can hear clearly. Maybe you should consider that not everyone belongs in first class. Some people need to earn their place instead of taking what they haven't worked for. The words hang in the air like an accusation, and Marcus feels the familiar fire building in his chest, the same fire that drove him through Harvard Business School, through his first corporate job where colleagues questioned every decision, through the boardroom battles that eventually made him the youngest African-American CEO in the airline industry. But this time, the fire has fuel it's never had before. This time, he's not the outsider fighting to get in. He's the man who owns the building. And these people are about to learn what happens when you bite the hand that literally feeds you. Robert decides to escalate, moving closer to Marcus's seat with the swagger of someone who believes himself untouchable. My colleague raises a valid point. Perhaps you obtained this ticket through questionable means. Corporate fraud is more common than people think. The accusation is bold, reckless, and completely unfounded, exactly the kind of statement that will look devastating in the legal proceedings that are now inevitable. That's a serious allegation, Marcus replies, his voice remaining steady while his fingers begin typing another message to Jessica. This one includes specific badge numbers, exact quotes, and a directive that will soon turn this aircraft into ground zero for the largest customer service scandal in aviation history. Other passengers are no longer pretending not to listen. The entire first-class cabin has become an audience to a drama that's unfolding in real time, and several people are now recording everything on their phone. Sarah leans down, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that everyone can still hear. People like you always think you can game the system. But we see through it. People like me, Marcus repeats slowly, as if testing the phrase for evidence purposes. Could you clarify what you mean by that? The question is a legal trap, and Sarah walks into it with remarkable enthusiasm. You know exactly what I mean. People who don't have legitimate reasons to be here, who use affirmative action and diversity programs to get things they haven't earned. The silence that follows is deafening. David Hoffman's mouth falls open slightly. In his 40 years as a federal judge, he's seen discrimination, but rarely so blatantly stated. The tech executive in 3C stops typing, her eyes wide with disbelief. Marcus nods slowly, as if this confirmation is exactly what he was waiting for. His phone buzzes with an incoming message from Jessica. Condition Alpha activated. Legal and PR standing by. Media alert prepared. Board members notified. What are your instructions? He types back quickly. Full implementation. Document everything. Prepare for immediate termination protocols. Robert, emboldened by what he perceives as Marcus's passivity, decides to drive the point home. The fact is, some people belong in first class, and others don't. It's not about money, it's about knowing your place. My place, Marcus says quietly, the words carrying weight that neither Sarah nor Robert can comprehend. The aircraft continues its steady path toward London, but inside the cabin, the trajectory has shifted dramatically. What began as routine discrimination has become something much larger, a case study in institutional racism that will soon be examined in boardrooms, courtrooms, and newsrooms around the world. Marcus looks out the window at the endless expanse of clouds below, each one distinct yet part of a larger pattern. Like this incident, individual acts of prejudice that reveal systemic problems requiring systemic solutions. Thank you for clarifying your position, he tells Sarah and Robert. It's very helpful to understand exactly where everyone stands. Neither of them recognizes the statement for what it is. A prosecutor's closing argument delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who already knows the verdict. The confrontation escalates with the inevitable momentum of a train wreck, each moment building toward a collision that will reshape everything aboard Flight 447. What began as isolated incidents of discrimination has now metastasized into a full-scale assault on Marcus's dignity, and the entire first-class cabin has become unwilling witnesses to institutional racism playing out in real time. Sarah returns with backup, a senior flight attendant named Patricia, who carries herself with the authority of someone accustomed to handling difficult passengers. Her arrival signals that this situation has been classified as a problem requiring management intervention, though she clearly has no understanding of the actual dynamics at play. Mr. Williams, Patricia's voice carries the practiced calm of customer service training mixed with barely concealed irritation. I understand you're having concerns about our service. Perhaps we can find a solution that works for everyone. The diplomatic language cannot mask the underlying assumption that Marcus is the problem requiring a solution, rather than the victim of a systematic campaign of harassment that would violate every policy Global Airways has ever written. I appreciate your attention to this matter, Marcus replies, his tone so professionally neutral that it borders on the clinical. Could you explain to me why my meal service differs from other passengers? Patricia examines the moldy sandwich with the same theatrical confusion her colleagues displayed earlier. Our catering sometimes varies based on specific requirements and availability. Specific requirements, dietary restrictions, special accommodations. Patricia's words dance around the truth like a politician avoiding direct questions. Some passengers have different needs. The euphemisms are almost more insulting than direct slur. At least honest racism has the dignity of clarity. This coded language treats everyone involved like fools, as if the discrimination becomes acceptable when wrapped in corporate speak. Robert decides to raise the stakes further. Sir, we've received reports from other passengers about your behavior. There are concerns about potential security risks. The lie is breathtaking in its audacity. Marcus has interacted with exactly no one except the flight crew, has raised his voice to no one, has done nothing more threatening than exist while black in first class. But he recognizes the tactic create a security narrative that justifies any subsequent action. Which passengers? Marcus asks, his legal training kicking in automatically. What specific behaviors? When did these alleged incidents occur? The questions are precise, prosecutorial, designed to expose the fabrication for what it is. Robert shifts uncomfortably, suddenly realizing he's been asked to provide details for a story that exists only in his imagination. We don't disclose the identity of passengers who report concerns, Patricia interjects, attempting to rescue her colleague from a trap he set for himself. David Hoffman in seat 1 Ampere can no longer contain himself. Excuse me. His voice carries the authority of someone accustomed to controlling courtrooms. I've been sitting here for the entire flight. This gentleman has done absolutely nothing inappropriate. Your staff, however, has engaged in what appears to be systematic harassment. The intervention of a white passenger, particularly one who clearly commands respect, changes the dynamic immediately. Patricia's confidence wavers as she realizes the situation has witnesses who won't be dismissed or intimidated. Sir, we appreciate your concern, but this is a matter between the airline and our passenger. Patricia attempts to redirect. No, David's voice grows sharper. This is a matter of civil rights being violated in public. I'm a retired federal judge, and what I'm witnessing constitutes clear discrimination. His words land like a bomb in the confined space of the cabin. The revelation that a federal judge is not only witnessing but actively challenging their behavior sends visible shockwaves through the flight crew. Marcus watches this unfold with the fascination of someone observing a case study in real time. His phone buzzes continuously with updates from Jessica, legal teams being assembled, media contacts being activated, board members being briefed on what's about to become a corporate crisis of unprecedented magnitude. But the flight crew, oblivious to the forces marshaling against them, doubles down on their original strategy. Judge or not, Sarah declares with remarkable short-sightedness. "We have authority over this aircraft, and we don't appreciate passengers who don't know their place." The phrase "know their place" hangs in the air like a confession. In a single moment, Sarah has provided a soundbite that will be replayed on news programs, quoted in civil rights lawsuits, and studied in business schools as an example of how not to represent a corporation. Marcus's phone pings with an incoming call from Jessica. He glances at the screen, then at the flight crew who have unknowingly provided enough evidence to end their careers and possibly send Global Airways' stock price into free fall. "Would you excuse me for a moment?" Marcus says politely, answering the call. "Marcus, we're ready to proceed with full implementation." Jessica's voice is professional but urgent. "Legal says we have enough for immediate termination and potential criminal charges. PR is standing by with crisis management protocols. The board is asking for your go-ahead." Marcus looks around the cabin at David Hoffman, recording everything on his phone, at other passengers staring in disbelief, at flight attendants who still believe they hold all the power in this situation. "Proceed," he says quietly into the phone. "Full implementation, maximum consequences." He ends the call and looks up at Patricia, Sarah, and Robert with the calm expression of someone who has just activated a nuclear option. "Thank you for your patience," he tells them. "I think we're about to resolve this situation very quickly." None of them understand that they've just witnessed their own professional execution being ordered by the man they've spent the last 3 hours trying to humiliate. The moment of truth arrives not with fanfare, but with the quiet buzz of Patricia's communication device. The call comes from the cockpit, Captain Jennifer Hayes, requesting immediate attendance for an urgent operational matter. Patricia accepts the summons with the confidence of someone expecting support from higher authority, completely unaware that the higher authority has already been contacted and is currently mobilizing resources that will reshape her understanding of corporate hierarchy. As Patricia disappears behind the cockpit door, Marcus's phone illuminates with an incoming call from a number that would make every Global Airways employee stop breathing. The direct line of William Chen, chairman and CEO of the airline's parent company, Transcontinental Holding. But Marcus doesn't take the call. Instead, he watches as other passengers, particularly David Hoffman, continue documenting the situation with their phones, creating an evidentiary record that will soon be scrutinized by lawyers, journalists, and civil rights organizations across the country. Sarah and Robert remain in the aisle, their body language suggesting they're waiting for Patricia to return with reinforcements and vindication. They have no comprehension that the reinforcements are coming, just not for them. The cabin door opens, and Patricia emerges with Captain Hayes, whose expression suggests she's just received information that has fundamentally altered her understanding of the situation. Behind them walks another figure, First Officer David Park, whose presence indicates this has escalated to a full flight crew response. But it's the look on Captain Hayes's face that tells the real story. Her eyes find Marcus immediately, and in them he sees recognition, alarm, and what appears to be barely controlled panic. "Mr. Williams." Captain Hayes's voice carries the careful tone of someone walking through a minefield. "I understand there's been some confusion regarding your travel experience today." The word confusion is diplomatic code for career-ending disaster, and everyone in the cabin can sense the seismic shift in power dynamics. Marcus stands slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. From his briefcase, he withdraws a leather portfolio and opens it to reveal his Global Airways corporate identification, not the employee badge of a middle manager, but the executive credentials that mark him as one of the highest-ranking officers in the company. "Captain Hayes." Marcus's voice remains steady, professional, and absolutely devastating in its implications. "I'm Marcus Williams, Chief Executive Officer of Global Airways. I believe we need to discuss the customer service standards being demonstrated on my aircraft." The silence that follows is so complete that the only sound is the steady hum of jet engines carrying them through 38,000 feet of air that has suddenly become much thinner for everyone except Marcus. Sarah's face drains of color so quickly that other passengers later describe it as watching someone disappear in real time. Robert actually staggers backward, bumping into the galley cart with a metallic crash that punctuates the moment perfectly. Patricia's mouth opens and closes without sound, like a fish suddenly aware it's been pulled from water and is now gasping in an environment where it cannot survive. But it's Captain Hayes who recovers first, her decades of training in crisis management, allowing her to process the magnitude of what has just been revealed. "Mr. Williams, we had no idea you were traveling today." "Clearly," Marcus replies, his tone carrying the weight of someone who has just revealed himself to be exactly the person these employees should have been trying to impress rather than humiliate. David Hoffman, still recording from seat 1 Ampere, whispers to his wife, "This is the most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed." Other passengers begin to understand what they're seeing, not just the resolution of a discrimination incident, but the exposure of systematic failures that reach to the very core of corporate culture. Marcus returns his identification to his portfolio with the measured calm of someone accustomed to moments of revelation. "Captain Hayes, I'd like you to know that over the past 3 hours, I've documented numerous violations of our company's anti-discrimination policies, customer service standards, and basic human decency protocols. Each word is chosen with surgical precision, designed to convey not just personal disappointment but institutional failure that will require institutional response. I've also been in communication with our corporate headquarters, our legal department, and our board of directors. They are currently preparing responses that I believe will be quite comprehensive." Sarah finally finds her voice, though it emerges as barely more than a whisper. "Mr. Williams, we didn't know." "You didn't know I was your boss," Marcus interrupts gently. "But that shouldn't matter. You should treat every passenger with dignity and respect, regardless of who they are or what they look like." The moral authority in his voice is absolute, the kind that comes from someone who has just proven that justice, while sometimes delayed, is never truly denied. "However," Marcus continues, his tone shifting to something more clinical, "since you now know exactly who I am, let me be very clear about what happens next." The cabin has become a courtroom, and Marcus Williams, Harvard Law graduate, former federal prosecutor, and now CEO, with the power to reshape careers with a single decision, is about to deliver a verdict that has been 3 hours in the making. The reckoning arrives with the methodical precision of a legal proceeding, each consequence delivered with the calm authority of someone whose power has just shifted from theoretical to absolute. Marcus Williams stands in the aisle of his own aircraft, surrounded by employees who minutes earlier believed they held all the cards, and begins implementing justice with the systematic approach that made him the youngest CEO in the industry. "Sarah Mitchell," Marcus begins, his voice carrying the formal tone of an official corporate proceeding. "Employee number 7739, 23 years of service." He pauses, consulting his phone where Jessica has provided complete personnel files in real time. "Your employment with Global Airways is terminated effective immediately upon landing." Sarah's knees buckle slightly, her hand gripping the nearest seat for support. 23 years of career, pension benefits, and professional identity evaporating in a single sentence. Robert Chen, employee number 4421, lead flight attendant. 15 years of service, also terminated immediately upon landing. Robert's face cycles through denial, anger, and finally acceptance as the reality settles over him like a shroud. Patricia Valdez, senior flight attendant, employee number 2156. Your termination will require additional review due to your supervisory role, but consider yourself suspended pending investigation. Marcus's phone buzzes with an incoming message from Jessica. Legal confirms all terminations are legally supported. HR is preparing severance packages. Security will meet the aircraft upon landing. Media response team is standing by. But Marcus isn't finished. The systematic nature of the discrimination he experienced suggests problems that extend far beyond individual employees. It indicates institutional failures that require institutional solutions. "Captain Hayes," Marcus continues, "while your crew's behavior is unconscionable, I recognize that discrimination training is clearly inadequate across our organization. You'll be participating in our new Diversity and Inclusion Excellence program, along with every flight crew member in our system." Captain Hayes nods rapidly, understanding that she's receiving mercy disguised as mandatory training. Furthermore, Marcus's voice takes on the tone of someone announcing policy changes that will reshape corporate culture. Effective immediately, Global Airways will implement the most comprehensive anti-discrimination program in the aviation industry. He pulls up another message from Jessica, this one containing preliminary budget allocations and program outlines that have been prepared for exactly this type of crisis. We're establishing a $50 million fund for diversity training, bias awareness, and cultural competency programs. Every employee, from ground crews to executives, will participate in quarterly training sessions. The number $50 million hangs in the air like a declaration of war against institutional racism. Additionally, we're creating an independent oversight board to investigate discrimination complaints, with authority to recommend personnel actions up to and including termination. David Hoffman, still recording from seat 1 Ampere, later tells reporters that watching Marcus transform a personal slight into systemic change was like witnessing history being written in real time. But the most devastating consequence is yet to come. Sarah, Robert, Patricia, Marcus's attention returns to the flight crew. Your behavior today has been recorded by multiple passengers, documented by our security systems, and will be shared with every major airline in the industry. The implication is clear: their careers in aviation are over, not just with Global Airways, but with any carrier that values reputation and legal compliance. However, Marcus pauses, and for a moment his expression softens slightly. Discrimination often stems from ignorance rather than malice. If you genuinely commit to education and growth, I'll personally write letters acknowledging your efforts to learn from this experience. The offer of redemption, conditional but real, demonstrates the difference between revenge and justice. Marcus isn't interested in destroying lives. He's focused on changing systems. His phone rings again, this time with a call he decides to take publicly. William Chen, chairman of Transcontinental Holdings, he announces to the cabin before answering. Marcus, the board is meeting in emergency session. Chen's voice is clearly audible to nearby passengers. We're prepared to make this a defining moment for corporate responsibility in aviation. Excellent, Marcus replies. I want this incident to become a case study in how companies should respond when their values are tested. When he ends the call, Marcus looks around the cabin at passengers who are no longer witnessing discrimination, but transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, he addresses everyone within hearing. I apologize that your flight today has been disrupted by behavior that contradicts everything Global Airways should represent. But I promise you this: what you've witnessed today will be the catalyst for changes that ensure no passenger ever experiences what I experienced. The applause begins slowly, with David Hoffman, then spreads through the first-class cabin as passengers realize they've been part of something historic. But for Sarah, Robert, and Patricia, the sound represents the closing of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of whatever comes next, a future they'll navigate without the careers they destroyed through their own choices. As the aircraft begins its descent toward London, Marcus Williams returns to his seat, opens his laptop, and begins composing the speech he'll deliver at tomorrow's Global Leadership Summit, a speech that will now focus on the responsibility that comes with power and the obligation to use that power for justice. The wheels of the aircraft touch down at Heathrow Airport with the gentle bump that marks the end of Flight 447, but Marcus Williams knows that what happened aboard this aircraft represents a beginning rather than an ending. The systematic changes he initiated at 38,000 feet will continue long after passengers disembark and scattered to their separate destinations. As the aircraft taxis toward the gate, Marcus's phone displays a stream of notifications that tell the story of how quickly corporate accountability can reshape public discourse. The hashtag #JusticeAt30000VEET has exploded across social media platforms, with David Hoffman's video recording garnering over 2 million views in the 3 hours since he posted it from the aircraft's Wi-Fi system. But Marcus finds himself thinking not about the viral nature of the incident, but about the deeper implications of what transpired. In his termination of Sarah, Robert, and Patricia, He exercised power that most people will never possess the ability to provide immediate consequences for discriminatory behavior. Yet he recognizes that such power is meaningless if it doesn't create lasting change beyond individual punishment. Mr. Williams, Captain Hayes approaches his seat as passengers begin gathering their belongings. Her expression carries the weight of someone who has spent the flight contemplating how close she came to career destruction. I want you to know that what happened today, it's not representative of our training or our values. Marcus looks up from his phone, where he's been reviewing the preliminary diversity training curriculum that Jessica's team has already begun developing. Captain Hayes, with respect, it was absolutely representative of your training. If it weren't, this incident couldn't have occurred. His words aren't accusatory but analytical, the observation of someone who has spent his career identifying systematic failures and implementing solutions. The question isn't whether discrimination exists in our industry, it obviously does. The question is whether we're committed to eliminating it through comprehensive, sustained effort rather than reactive measures that fade as soon as media attention diminishes. Captain Hayes nods, understanding that she's receiving education rather than criticism. As Marcus stands to disembark, he notices Sarah, Robert, and Patricia being escorted off the aircraft by Global Airways security personnel, a process that's professionally handled but unmistakably final. Their colleagues watch in stunned silence, beginning to understand that the corporate culture they thought they knew has shifted permanently. But Marcus's attention is drawn to the other passengers, particularly the young tech executive from Seat 3C, who has spent the flight live tweeting the incident to her 100,000 followers, and an elderly couple from row 4 who approach him with expressions of admiration mixed with embarrassment. "Mr. Williams," the woman says, her voice carrying the tremor of someone processing profound discomfort with her own previous silence. "My husband and I, we saw what was happening, but we didn't speak up. We should have said something earlier." Marcus extends his hand in greeting, his expression warm rather than judgmental. "What matters is that when you witnessed injustice, you documented it, and you're talking about it now. Change happens when people who have been silent find their voices." The exchange, overheard by other passengers, becomes part of the broader narrative that will emerge from Flight 447, not just a story about corporate accountability, but about individual responsibility to challenge discrimination when it occurs. As Marcus walks through the jet bridge toward Heathrow's terminal, his phone buzzes with a call from the BBC, requesting an interview about the incident that's reshaping conversations about discrimination in corporate America. He declines the immediate interview but agrees to a statement that will be released through Global Airways' communications department. The statement, crafted during his walk through the terminal, will read, "Today's incident aboard Flight 447 represents both a failure of individual judgment and an opportunity for systematic improvement. Global Airways commits not just to addressing this specific situation, but to becoming a model for how corporations can proactively combat discrimination rather than reactively respond to it." But the most significant moment comes as Marcus approaches customs, where David Hoffman, the retired federal judge whose intervention proved crucial, waits with his wife. "Mr. Williams," Judge Hoffman extends his hand. "In 40 years on the federal bench, I learned that justice delayed is often justice denied. What you accomplished today was justice delivered with precision and appropriate force." The endorsement from a respected jurist provides validation that transcends corporate politics or public relations considerations. More importantly, Judge Hoffman continues, "You've created a case study that will be taught in law schools and business schools for decades. This is how power should be used, not for revenge, but for reform." As Marcus finally exits the terminal into London's grey afternoon, he reflects on the transformation that began with a moldy sandwich and culminated in policy changes that will affect hundreds of thousands of employees and millions of passengers. The discrimination he experienced was personal, but his response has been institutional. The humiliation was individual, but the solution is systematic. And that, Marcus realizes, is how real change happens, not through viral videos or hashtag activism alone, but through the careful application of power, influence, and moral authority in service of principles larger than personal grievance. Flight 447 has landed, but the journey toward justice has just begun. The epilogue to Flight 447 unfolds not in the immediate aftermath of landing, but in the weeks and months that follow, as Marcus Williams transforms a moment of personal humiliation into a blueprint for institutional change that reverberates throughout the aviation industry and beyond. 3 weeks after the incident, Marcus stands before the Global Leadership Summit in Chicago, addressing an audience of 3,000 airline executives, government officials, and civil rights leaders. The speech he delivers becomes known as the Flight 447 Doctrine, a framework for corporate accountability that other industries quickly adopt. True leadership, Marcus tells the assembled crowd, is not measured by how well we perform when we're being watched, but by the systems we create to ensure excellence when we're not present to supervise. The Global Airways Diversity and Inclusion Excellence Program, funded by the $50 million commitment Marcus announced aboard the aircraft, becomes the most comprehensive anti-discrimination initiative in corporate America. Every employee undergoes quarterly training, with scenarios specifically designed around real incidents, including Flight 447. Sarah Mitchell, Robert Chen, and Patricia Valdez, whose terminations were upheld after thorough review, each chose different paths forward. Sarah enrolled in a cultural competency program at Northwestern University, ultimately becoming an advocate for airline worker diversity training. Robert relocated to Seattle and now works for a nonprofit organization focused on workplace discrimination prevention. Patricia faced the most serious consequences due to her supervisory role, but eventually found work with a consulting firm that helps companies develop bias awareness programs. David Hoffman, the retired federal judge whose intervention proved crucial, partners with Global Airways to develop a passenger advocacy program that allows travelers to report discrimination incidents directly to an independent oversight board. His testimony about Flight 447 becomes part of congressional hearings on discrimination in transportation. The incident's impact extends far beyond Global Airways. Within 6 months, 4 major airlines implement similar anti-discrimination programs, prompted partly by competitive pressure and partly by the viral nature of the Flight 447 recordings. The hashtag #JusticeAt30000 evolves from a single incident hashtag into a broader movement advocating for dignity in travel. But perhaps the most significant change is cultural rather than procedural. Marcus's response to discrimination methodical, proportionate, and focused on systematic solutions rather than individual revenge becomes a template for how leaders with power can address injustice effectively. The Harvard Business Review publishes a case study titled Power, Dignity, and Corporate Responsibility, Lessons from Flight 447, which is now required reading in MBA programs across the country. The case study examines not just what Marcus did, but how his approach balanced individual accountability with systematic reform. Marcus himself reflects on the incident during an interview with 60 Minutes 6 months later. The goal was never to destroy careers, but to save them. Every employee who participates in our diversity training, every passenger who travels without fear of discrimination, every competitor who improves their own policies, they all benefit from what happened on Flight 447. The interview, watched by 12 million viewers, includes follow-up footage of Global Airways' new training programs, testimony from employees about cultural changes within the company, and statistics showing measurable improvements in passenger satisfaction across demographic groups. Global Airways' stock price, which initially dipped following the incident, rebounds to reach all-time highs as investors recognize that strong diversity and inclusion programs reduce legal risks while expanding market appeal. Most significantly, the incident catalyzes federal legislation, the Passenger Dignity in Transportation Act, which requires standardized anti-discrimination training across all transportation industries and establishes penalties for companies that fail to address discriminatory behavior promptly. Marcus Williams, who began Flight 447 as a passenger experiencing discrimination, disembarked as the architect of the most significant advancement in transportation civil rights since the deregulation era. But the true measure of success comes not in policy documents or training programs, but in the countless passengers who now travel with confidence that their dignity will be protected, and in the employees who understand that excellence in customer service means excellence in human decency. The moldy sandwich that Sarah Mitchell served with such contempt has become a symbol of how small acts of discrimination reveal large systematic failures, and how those failures, when addressed with wisdom and determination, can become opportunities for transformation that benefit everyone. As Marcus often tells audiences during his speaking engagements about Flight 447, justice is not just about punishing wrong behavior. It's about creating systems that make wrong behavior less likely to occur. That's how we fly higher, all of us, together. Flight 447 has become more than an incident. It's become a movement, a methodology, and most importantly, a reminder that power wielded with wisdom can transform moments of injustice into catalysts for lasting change.